Hello and welcome back to the channel, and in today's video I'm going to be talking through everything you're missing or getting wrong with your controller. It's going to be based around the Sanwa M17, but most controllers have the same settings anyway, so everything to talk about in this video should be on your controller as well. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Okay, so the first thing might seem a little bit obvious, but you've got to make sure your controller is comfortable in your hand. So there's quite a few ways of doing this. You can change the size of the grip on the back here. You can change the position of the trigger. You can also change how thick the back or top part of the trigger is for different, thicknesses of finger, I guess. You can also put the wheel on the left-hand side for if you're left-handed. I would probably only do this if you've just started and you're left-handed. There's a lot of people that are left-handed and have it on the right and are fine or have different ways of holding it. You can also change the spring strength of the trigger and the wheel. I would leave this fairly stock out the box. If you're going to change it, try not to change it too much, just slacken it off or tighten the screws a tiny amount. I personally like the wheel a little bit looser than out the box, but that's just a personal preference. One thing to make sure is once you've set everything, leave it all the same. Don't keep changing it between each meeting, each run, because you'll just get lost. Okay, so the second thing is a little bit less obvious than the first, and it's things you can quickly change on the track if you've made a setup change or the track conditions have changed and you need to just quickly change something to make your car feel a little bit nicer to drive. So the first thing I would change is the brakes. Now, I normally try and make sure the brakes are turned down to a point where you can use almost all of it without any sliding or movement at the back. This means you can sort of push the car a little bit harder and just be a little bit more assured when getting on the brakes. You know what the car's going to do. So yeah, you can just push it a little bit harder. Now, to change the brakes, what you need to do is with your thumb, just flick this switch here, forward or backwards, and it will go from 0 to 100% brake dual rate, and that will just change how strong the brakes feel on the track. Now, the second thing you can quickly change on the track is the steering dual rate, which is the steering lock, so how far your wheels will turn. This is vital if you make a setup change which should give your car more front end, or let's say a wet track has just dried out and it's got crazy traction and crazy steering. You can just knock this down so the car just feels really nice to drive and smooth to drive. So again, you can do this by moving this switch here next to the wheel, and this will change your steering dual rate. Okay, so there are a few more settings you can mess around with in the controller, and one of these is the throttle and steering curve. This is a little complicated to explain, so bear with me here. So when you change the steering curve, it changes the rate in which the steering comes in. So you will do this on your car basically because steering racks are not always linear. The steering is not always linear through the throw. So you'll change this to make the steering just sort of feel linear and nice. So for an example, on the four-wheel drive we'll run around -15 to -20, and on the two-wheel drive we always run pretty much from 0 to -7. This is just because on these individual cars, that's what makes the steering feel right. Now, with the throttle curve, with a 10 scale electric car, just don't touch this because it will just start getting strange. It will just start feeling weird. Obviously, if you change it and you get used to it, then it'll be fine, but just leave it on 0. Okay, so another thing you can change on here is the feeling setting. Now, this goes on a range between 1S and 7S on the throttle and steering. Now, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't really know exactly what this does, but normally when you turn it down, it will make it feel a little bit number. So let's say you turn the steering one down, the steering will just feel a little bit number, a little bit more blunt, and the higher you go, the sharper the steering will feel. So we've always just run it on 7. We've not messed around with it, but I do know a few guys who change the throttle one a bit more than the steering. They say in the wet they'll turn it down a bit, but we've always stuck with 7 on both because we're not entirely sure what it does, and that's just what we're used to. Okay, so another setting you can mess around with, which we don't really ever mess with, but I know a lot of people do, is the servo speed. So if you turn it down your servo speed, the car's gonna feel a little bit number, a little bit less pointy, less darty. It's not gonna throw itself at the corners as much, which might make it feel a little bit easier to drive. However, if there's a couple quick chicanes in the track, the servo might simply not be able to keep up, and you're just going to lose lap time. So it's a bit of a fine balance to get right, but if you do, you'll be rewarded. So when you're changing it, you've got to make sure the forward and return is the same, otherwise it's just going to feel odd and wrong. So you've got to make sure them two are the same. And yes, when you're on the day at the track, don't change it between each run, because it's just you're gonna mess yourself up if you're doing this. Sort of set it at the start of the day, and then try not, if you do change it, just don't change it drastically, just little bits each run. Okay, so a couple other things people have messed around with that we've honestly just never tried or not got around to trying yet is the ABS setting and R mode. Obviously the ABS setting, I'm assuming, is just ABS. We've never tried it. I do plan on trying it at some point, but yeah, we've just not tried that yet. And the R mode, I honestly have no idea what this does. I don't have it on. I will try it at some point, but yeah, I've not tried this yet. If any of you have tried either of these, then be sure to comment and let us know. But that should be it for this video. So if you did please like the video and subscribe, and we will see you next time.